In the not-too-distant future, a revolution is brewing, one that will change the very fabric of our existence. It's a tale of cells that hold the key to unlocking the mysteries of life itself. Let us venture into the unknown, for in this age of stem cells, anything is possible.
I've seen some beautiful flowers.
Hi, Jan.
Hi, Donna.
Thank you for making it. I know it's raining like crazy.
Well, I am thrilled to be here. And actually, it was making me giggle because on the way over, I was listening to a podcast that used the term raining on your parade, and in review of some, recent funding changes at a governmental federal level. So, it was good for a laugh, at least.
Isn't that crazy? What's going on?
It's a tumultuous time.
It's like a complete overhaul in looking at, it's like we're finally looking at our books.
Which is healthy.
Which is healthy. Yeah, I think we need to, as a taxpayer, I'm grateful that we're taking this time to look at everything carefully. And, do you watch Marie Kondo? Do you know Marie Kondo?
Only when I'm on a tidying spree.
Oh, okay. Well, the beginning of this year, I kind of was. And I had to, she talks about having to purge your entire closet. The way you clean your closet, you don't start off by looking at everything and determining, do I want to keep this or not? You'll never get anywhere. And we've all been there. What you have to do is take everything out. You have to purge everything and then put back in what is necessary. And so I know a lot of people, we do a ton of research with academia and universities, and I know everyone is affected right now. Every major department is affected, and nobody knows what tomorrow is going to hold. But I am confident that if we take a look at what has been working, what are good investments that we're making, because we must, as a country, we have to invest in innovation in healthcare. And if we can identify what those good things are, and put those back in and eliminate the waste, I think that's a very healthy exercise. Yeah. It's painful for now, though. There's no question about it. It'll be painful for everybody. But we'll just get over this, shed a few tears, and go on. Yeah. And hopefully we'll come out stronger for it. Yeah.
Yes. Well, and it'll be more efficient. With any large-scale organizational change, there's a level of emotion in the beginning. And as people turn their hands to the work, I think we'll learn a lot, and we'll move forward. But specific to Hope Bio, your cells are involved in some DoD-backed research right now. Is there an impact to Hope Bio?
So far not. I am reminded constantly that nothing has been affected, but I think it's yet. I think they just haven't gotten to all of this yet. I think at some point there will be a temporary freeze on everything, and in order to make sure and verify that all the contracts are correct. So I'm not. I welcome that, and we have been through one of the things they're cutting out right now is something called overhead. Okay, they're saying that they're no longer going to pay universities overhead, or they're going to put a limit to it, 15% overhead. You have to think of that like a tip. We do sponsored research as well, and we also have to pay the university's contract and their overhead price. So if a trial is $1 million, okay, in Texas, I'm not going to tell the institution, but we have a contract, we pay 56% overhead. That means that the trial has been budgeted for $1 million, okay? But the bill that we have to pay is $1.56 million. Now that 0.56, that 56%, the researcher never sees. The researcher is already budgeted. That $1 million already covers their costs and covers their research. That 0.56 goes directly to the university system and whatever overhead they are putting into that, which probably means their buildings and their infrastructure and all the other stuff. you'd rather tip the scientists, right? The actual people that are doing this hard work. Yeah. They don't see it at all. And 56%, in my opinion, is incredibly high. It's like the tip creep, it's just constantly getting higher. I was in discussions with a group in Massachusetts. Their overhead, 86%. Crazy stuff.
Well, and you're seeing released lately through a number of sources, kind of the top 10, top 15, top 20 overhead percentages, and they're consistently in the 60 to 80% range, which I think if you ask the average person on the street, hey, could you run your house? Could you run any business you're a part of with overhead that high? The answer would be no. So it's like you said, it's valid, and I look forward to seeing what comes of it in the days to come.
Well, certainly it won't. Restricting overhead on the university administration level, I hope, will mean that we'll have more dollars in the budget to go to the actual work that's being done. And therefore, there should be more of it.
And more progress.
Yes, more progress.
Yes.
That's right. Yep. So we got to get back to our topic here.
Speaking of progress, yeah.
Yes. Where did we leave off last episode?
So last week we talked about minimal manipulation. We're moving in a series through the various criteria that form the bedrock of some of the FDA regulations that govern and affect how people access cell therapies.
Because cell therapies are going to be defined as either a human cell tissue product, which largely has no regulation, no FDA filings and drug filings and things like this, or it is regulated as a drug. So the 4 criteria, real quick, were minimal manipulation, homologous use, combination with other articles, and then the systemic effect. So today, we're on the topic of homologous use. So what the heck does homologous mean?
So FDA does provide a definition of homologous, and as defined in 21 CFR 1271, homologous use means the repair, reconstruction, replacement, or supplementation of a recipient's cells or tissues with an HCTP that performs the same basic function or functions in the recipient as in the donor. So what's it mean?
That's a lot of words, Jan. Yeah. What's it mean? It means your HCTP has exactly the same use as what those cells or tissues originally had. Same. Example. You have a bad knee, cartilage shot down. You need new cartilage. So you take some healthy cartilage tissue and put it into that knee. Cartilage. Same. Homologous. This is fun. And folks listening, I don't know what compelled you to listen to this conversation, but these definitions and terms are so important in the future of our own healthcare. Because these definitions are defining what we are allowed and not allowed to access. So we should all care about this because it actually directly impacts you and your family, right? Okay, yes. So we have to learn this.
These definitions also reflect how we think about cellular therapeutics and how we think about regenerative medicine in general, right? Mm-hmm. How we quantify, and they're going to affect our regulation going forward. And since that's such a topic of public conversation now, and will probably continue to be, it's the perfect time to talk about it.
Correct. Okay, sorry about that tangent. Let's talk about another example of homologous use. Burn. You have a burn, and your skin is burnt off. So you need healthy skin. These are called skin grafts. Skin taken from another area of your body and then put onto that area to replace that burnt skin. Skin. Homologous. Same. Yes. So that is, those are pretty clear examples. Yes. So can you use a donor cell for this application?
It's a very good question. I mean, it stands to reason that a donor cell may not act in a recipient's body exactly as it did in the original. So how's that regulated?
So like your skin and my skin are different, clearly. But can I get your skin? And the answer to that is actually yes. It does fall under homologous use. Now it's funny because genetically it may be different, but skin is still acting like skin. It's sort of like the oak trees outside. They're all oak trees, right? So they all are comprised of the same thing, even though they might be different in and of themselves, right? Yeah. So this is actually happening all the time in cancer patients, right? Cancer patients, you actually wouldn't use the cancer patient's own bone marrow to give them a bone marrow transplant. Bone marrow also falls under the HCTP, and it is homologous use. When you put bone marrow back into the recipient, those cells in the bone marrow, so that it's not that the bone marrow itself is going to do anything. They're relying on the stem cells that are inside of that bone marrow to make and generate new blood. That's the whole idea behind bone marrow transplants. But that also does not fall under non-homologous because it is homologous. Bone marrow is acting as bone marrow in another body. So what are examples of non-homologous?
Well, I mean, currently, cell therapies like the ones that we manufacture here, adipose derived from fat tissue, are considered non-homologous.
Right, which I think is a more clear because we are using the cells that we manufacture here for all kinds of applications. But let's take an example that happens all the time, like physicians taking bone marrow and or physicians taking some tissue. So let's say they take fat. Okay, they take fat and they spin it down and they do some level of separation. So all this happens within the doctor's office. They do some level of separation of the cells so that you're getting a cell pellet. I mean, it has all kinds of cells in it. It's not like a pure sample or anything, but you have some cells in it. And then you take that and you inject it into the knee. Because you're saying that the stem cells that are inside that fat, which we know there are going to go into that knee and become new cartilage and things. So the argument there is that that is non-homologous because your knee did not have fat stem cells to begin with. Yeah. So FDA actually is enforcing that as best as they can. I mean, they send out these warning letters all the time to, at first it was a lot to clinics, individual clinics, like you cannot be selling this. You can't be claiming to do this. You can't be saying that you do stem cell anything. And it moved into the area of also the products that are being sold at clinics right now. So in the United States, if you hear or see anybody talk about stem cells and providing stem cells, and we hear it all the time, my doctor has these stem cell treatments at his office. If it's anything in the United States, it largely is these two categories. So the first are HCTPs, so human cell tissue products that are minimally manipulated, that have been taken normally from a donor, a healthy donor that qualifies, and the cells are minimally processed. The tissues are either dried or they're put in some kind of preservative. But remember, because of the regulations, they really can't do much with it. They literally take the cells or the tissues and that's it. they're ready to put into another person. FDA has been cracking down on not just the clinics that are selling these products, but the people and entities that are distributing these products, and also the manufacturers. Now, the manufacturers say, we're not responsible. We make the products, but we don't sell them. And we're not putting them into patients, so we're not responsible for any of this. We shouldn't be getting a warning letter. Agreed?
Well, it's an interesting thing. I have a handful of questions. First, let's talk about these warning letters. Do they really have any teeth? Are they having an impact? And, we're starting to see a lot more of them lately. What do we think will happen there? But it's an interesting area because if you're talking about a biologic that's manufactured by an entity, usually a commercial entity, but once you get into the physician's office, where does the Hippocratic Oath come in, and where does the practice of medicine and laws and regulations governing the practice of medicine, where do those take primacy? At what point in this chain of custody, in this continuum, from the manufacturer to distributors to physicians to patients, are the regulatory areas overlapping?
Well, I think in regenerative medicine, those lines have to be clear. There are clear discrepancies within these products. Like in this example, where a manufacturer takes these tissues, let's say they take amniotic membrane. So after a baby's born, they take the placenta, and from that placenta, they take the outer membrane of that tissue and they dry it up. And you're probably saying, what does dried up tissue do for anybody? That's everyone's question. But let's say, and they're not allowed to make a claim. So how are they selling these products? So realistically, they have to be saying something, because no one would buy it if it didn't do anything, right? So what is the claim that's being made on this tissue? Now, the idea, I'll tell you the idea behind these perinatal or, these tissues that they sell. They are supposed to act as a scaffold. So when they go into the body, for example, for like surgical use, any surgical use, sometimes people use it in heart repair, others use it for cartilage repair, like all kinds of things. If you add that tissue, the idea is that the innate stem cells in your body are going to naturally, it's like a magnet. It's a magnet for the cells in your body to go and fix. That's the idea. And it's supposed to help to some degree, but there's no, again, because this is not a drug, there are no formal clinical trials on this, and so it's an unknown as to how effective it really is in each individual case.
But let's back up. So it's not a drug, but no adult body has amniotic cells in it or amniotic substance. So how?
Good. That's absolutely right. Yeah. We adult bodies do not have any amniotic tissues. So how can that even be homologous? So you're absolutely right. Every company, firm, clinic selling amniotic membrane stuff for humans will eventually get a warning letter. If you haven't yet, it isn't because you're doing something okay. It's just they haven't gotten to you yet. That's just the reality of what it is, because that's exactly right. It falls under the homologous use issue. Because there's nothing in your body that's a placenta. So yeah, they can't be doing what they're doing. Yeah. And you look at it and you say, oh, is FDA... Now, one of the arguments, everyone says, oh, but this is perfectly safe. And the people who are saying that, of course, are those parties that are getting these warning letters, but they're also patients, right? There are many patients, we come across a lot of them too, that got this treatment from their doctor and they're feeling great, right? And so you have also a patient population that is saying that this should be allowed for everyone. This is so wonderful. This is allowed for everyone. FDA has, FDA was first created to ensure our safety, right? Safety. At some point, it expanded into efficacy. They also began determining efficacy. And regulating that, right? So you have to have a certain threshold in order for your products to be approved by FDA. And they are, what they are, or what they say they're concerned with is also vulnerable patients and firms taking advantage of vulnerable patients. They are they are sensitive populations. We shouldn't be selling things that we're not sure of, right? But when you think about safety, there's safety in the products. We should be concerned about the safety of the products going into our bodies. Should we be also concerned about the safety of our wallets, our financial health? Do they really care that we're being duped? I think that there are protections in the United States for that, are there not, that are outside of FDA?
There are. And, all of these areas of concern that we've listed, consumer protection, efficacy, safety, these are valid. But in the entire regulatory landscape, we articulated that chain of custody before, from manufacturer to distributor to physician to patient. To me, there seems to be some overreach and some confusing overlap in these areas, right? The realm of efficacy is something that philosophically, you can make a good argument belongs more with the physician and the medical boards and the licensing bodies that ensure that physicians are practicing to a certain standard of care, that they take certain moral and ethical obligations, right? You talk about consumer protection. Well, that's what the Federal Trade Commission does, at least in theory. So why, to ask a hard-nosed question, why is FDA nosed into these areas? Because what it does ultimately is create confusion for the patient, gums up the process, slows it down exponentially, makes it billions of dollars more expensive to get therapeutics to market. And at the end of the day, you still have patients in chairs with debilitating illnesses seeking access. So is it overreach? I mean, what is the most appropriate regulatory role? Because there certainly is one. There needs to be one. But what is it?
It always has to come down to safety. I think that's a non-negotiable. For those saying we need to just abolish FDA altogether, I disagree completely. They are extremely risk averse for a good reason, right? They're very concerned. At least most of the questions that we get in any application are always surrounding safety. And after all these years doing all of these protocols, still safety, safety, safety. It's a good place to focus our attention on. That means safety is directly correlated to the safe manufacturing of these products. So anything that's not manufactured in your doctor's office, if your doctor does something wrong, I believe that should fall under the practice of medicine. There's no way FDA is going to control everything that a clinic does. But a state licensure sure can regulate that and control that. And there's not enough FDA agents in the world to go monitor every single clinic, right? The safety of products, though, that are manufactured and distributed, those can be and should be regulated by FDA. FDA should be aware of what kind of practices are going on, if sterility is being maintained, good practices are being maintained. That, I think, is essential for maybe an entity to have a license to be able to sell these products to doctors. So what happens once it gets into the doctor's hands? Right now, again, FDA's warning letters are going directly to the manufacturer for patients using it. And manufacturers respond like, we didn't give it to the patient, we don't know the patient, we never touched the patient, so why are we getting this warning letter? FDA says, well, you manufactured it. A lot of times, here are the problems with your manufacturing process. Oh, and on top of that, you had made these claims, or the use of this product is overreaching is definitely making a claim. And it could be unsaid. Who knows? They investigate in many different ways. They look at websites to see what's being sold. They look at They sometimes do investigations, undercover investigations, acting like patients, asking what these things are. And that's how they get their answers. So they know. I mean, how is a patient paying thousands? Often these because they're marketed as stem cell treatments that are legal, patients are paying thousands of dollars. They have no idea that they're getting a tiny piece of dried tissue, or they're getting, how about a different product? Let's talk about a different product that causes more confusion in this space. PRP. Yeah. What is PRP, Jan?
So PRP is platelet-rich plasma, and it's a concentrated blood product, right? So the idea is that we take some blood out, well, the royal we. Blood is taken out, right? It's kind of spun down, it's separated in some ways, and it's put back in a way that's regenerative, helpful, rejuvenating to the person receiving it.
So the platelets, you're getting your own platelets back.
Mm-hmm.
And you get them in concentrated.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same number going in and out, right? It's just more concentrated. So what would that do? So the idea is that those platelets secrete different growth factors. And those growth factors can be helpful in, let's say, like decreasing inflammation and things like this. But because they're not quantified, like we don't know how many platelets are going in and out, everybody's different. There's a lot of questions, so you can't really make any claims to this. But PRP is used largely in orthopedics and used for everything: shoulder injections, knee injections, all kinds of injections. Clearly, it is not homologous, right? Because it's not like our joints have all these platelets in there to begin with. So that's definitely non-homologous use. I wonder why FDA does not really care about that. I mean, PRP is used everywhere.
It's readily accessible, and it's a very interesting question that if you ask FDA directly, not to be too pointed, but you don't really get a clear answer, right? And this returns back to the original question: is FDA the best? Is the current regulatory model the most efficient one that makes FDA the repository of things like scientific definitions, right? I mean, we consulted them earlier for how a product acts in the body in a homologous or non-homologous manner. At the end of the day, the mechanistic studies are subordinated to what FDA determines at their discretion is homologous or non-homologous, which directly affects access. The fact of the matter is, if you accept the body as a system, as an interconnected whole, I don't know that you could argue that really anything stays exactly as it is where it's introduced in the manner, right?
Well,
it'd be a nuanced, complex, totally nerdy conversation. But the point is, you could make a debate out of just about anything, right? So if that is the mechanistic truth, but we have a regulatory body saying, no, we're going to declare these products homologous and these products non-homologous in a sometimes seemingly arbitrary manner that affects people's ability to access investigational therapies they want to use, right? I can't see a way where you can avoid any other conclusion than this process needs some overhaul in the United States.
Yeah, I think that, when you look at, when you go back to what's happened in the PRP space, it's a great example to look back on and study. Like, is this taking advantage of lots of patients? Like, do we have lots of patient protesters about about PRP? I think because PRP became a clear product that I think generally everybody knows about now. People talk about it all the time. It's very clear in terms of its intended use and what it is. I think we tell patients, this is what it is. It may or may not help. I think physicians are very careful when they sell this because they know, I think the success is like 50-50. Some people do very well and some people don't. It just depends. A lot of cellular based therapeutics are arguably more host dependent, more dependent on one's health status than the cells themselves. That's actually one of the arguments that are made. So it's impossible to know whether these therapeutics will work in the body. But I think if you look at satisfaction of patient satisfaction, I think there is a general understanding and acceptance that PRP may or may not work. And so if they decide to pay for it, then they decide to pay for it. And it is I think a healthy way to go about this. Once you have like critical mass and you have lots of people accessing PRP and different techniques on how to use it too, right? It may not work in this non-homologous setting, it may not work, but it may work in this one. But until that data is collected, and people within that field, they get together at scientific conferences and they talk about these things and start doing meta-analyses on their patient populations, they'll get better understanding of this, right? And they'll be able to report. It may be partially anecdotal, but still pretty good. Again, critical mass is what you need. You need that to be able to determine the true effectiveness of a product. And I think that's a great example of how deregulation. Because imagine if they did try and regulate PRP and all the uses. It'd be never ending, right?
Well, they'd run into the same challenges that they're running into today with cell therapy.
That's true.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and that's where, and I think it's extremely interesting and informational and helpful to go into detail in PRP. But as the conversation proceeds, it always comes to the same intersection as, wait, there are such striking similarities between these two families of technology. Why is one regulated so differently than the other?
When they're all pretty much, they're all bucketed in the same category. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is confusing. So going back to the idea that, or the question, is FDA overreaching their boundaries? In the first example of products that are made outside of a doctor's office, those ones, again, FDA should ensure the safety of. But once those products get to the doctor's office, should it be a free-for-all?
Should it be a free-for-all? I personally say absolutely not. You can look at the U.S. stem cell clinic case, which is kind of we hear you talk a lot about that still today in the cell therapy landscape, because it shaped regulation in such a pronounced way and so appropriately. Let's return back to that organizational model, right? Manufacturer, distributor, physician, patient. The appropriate protections at the highest levels and the appropriate which of this, and at the beginning, the nexus, which in this case would be the manufacturer, the appropriate protections there will trickle down and will allow more layers of regulation, at the state level, at the medical level, et cetera, et cetera. So should it be a free-for-all? No, but I don't see a possible way in the United States today in which it would legally become a free-for-all because there are so many other levels of protection. But if you could talk a little bit about that U.S. stem cell clinic case, that's an interesting one and an important one, I think, for anybody who starts doing their own research. If you're still listening to this conversation, you're going to come across this. So.
Oh my gosh, the amount of times I've heard of this case.
Yeah.
This case involved using fat. Again, fat as a source, okay? I hate the word fat stem cell. That is the most inaccurate representation of a stem cell. It's not a fat stem. There's no such thing. It could be a pre-adipocyte if you want to get technical. But a fat fat tissue is a source in which you find stem cells. Now, there are all kinds of stem cells. Again, stem cells that make fat, or stem cells that are multipotent. There can be mesenchymal stem cells in there. There can be some hematopoietic stem cells in there because there is blood in fat. So there are different cell types in fat tissue. The first step when you have fat, and Taylor will show some images here. We collect fat. Fat is taken from patients and people who bank with us. Fat is sent over here, and we spin down that fat, and we separate that fat. Okay, when we separate that fat from all the blood and gunk, and then that cell population. Again, that cell population is a mixed bag. All kinds of cell types in that cell population. So it's not pure by any sense of the imagination. And it's not like, it may have some stem cells in there, but I would not say, oh, those are our stem cells. Those are a lot of fat cells probably too in there. But that is called SVF. When you separate, that's called stromal vascular fraction. Again, stromal vascular fraction is an unpure population with lots of cell types. So if you take this concoction and you decide I'm gonna put it in your eyeball, you think that's a good idea?
I generally don't let people put things in my eyeball at all.
Well, that's what happened in this case. That's precisely what happened in this case. Yeah. SVF was isolated and then injected into people who had eye issues causing blindness. And when people read this, they automatically say, oh, we've got to stay away from stem cells. Stem cells are going to cause blindness. No. Just in the last week, I have read, I can't even tell you how many papers I've read about stem cell injections improving eyesight. Now, you have to read between the lines. These are well-defined, what we call characterized. That means that you know the character of each cell, of the cell population you're putting in the eye. Therefore, you can actually say what worked. Like in that eye instance, you wouldn't even be able to know, in that blindness case, like you wouldn't be able to know like what hurt the eye. Like, was it a certain cell population that shouldn't have been there? Was it the needle? Like, what was it? The cases right now that are being used in eye regeneration for macular degeneration, for retina issues, for all kinds of things, are using pure populations of cells. And it's really exciting. We're just at the beginning of the application of these cells, and it's really, really exciting. And so how do you go from that to this? Like, oh, stem cells cause blindness, to oh no, they can be very helpful. Again, it all goes down to the cell population. So going back now, all the way back to FDA. FDA, when they have rules about the manufacturing of cells, that is one of the requirements. We, at least here at Hope Bio, have to demonstrate the purity of our product. We actually have to characterize the cells each and every time you were to receive them. So Jan, if you were in a protocol where you had to receive your own mesenchymal stem cells, that's what we make here, and you were scheduled for 5 infusions, all 5 would be considered 5 separate lots, even though they're all made exactly the same way. And every time you receive them, we have to run through characterization each and every time. Now, in any other context, and I can't speak to every regulation around the world, but there are many countries that don't require this level of testing. And people will say, this is overkill. Why do you have to do this? You know what your cell population is. But again, it's to avoid these kinds of instances, right? To ensure that you know exactly what's going back into the body. So when we put our cells back into the body, again, they were derived from fat. But mesenchymal stem cells actually exist systemically in your body. Again, they weren't the ones that were taken from fat, but they're still mesenchymal stem cells. Remember we talk about gold? Like gold is gold. Like whether you mine it from a mountain or you take it from a riverbank, like it's the same kind of gold. And we're getting caught up in the details. Is it homologous use or is it not? Let's say you get away from, let's say we are just bypassing the manipulation because FDA has already said cultured cells is more than minimal manipulation, which again can be argued. But homologous, is it homologous or not? FDA would say, we already know the answer to this. FDA says it is always non-homologous use because your fat stem cells would never be doing a function outside of being in the fat.
I think you could make a very convincing argument that it is homologous use, but I think you could make a more convincing argument that it's not an appropriate question for this group of therapeutics. I don't think it's a question that ultimately impacts efficacy, and I don't think it's one that promotes access by patients in need to promising cellular therapeutics.
Well said, Jan.
Thanks.
So maybe as a conclusion, if we can offer a possible solution that could ease the load of our friends at FDA too, how can these HCTP products, including PRP and all of these products that we've been talking about, how can consumers get a better handle on efficacy? It's such a mixed bag. Again, you're normally just having to believe in whatever your doctor says. And because it's not a drug, there's no like drug pamphlet that you can read on what the trial results are. But is there some way we can do this? I think a registry system of some sort that tracks any type of use. Maybe there are just several columns that have to be filled out, but the type of use and the end result and how it was applied and the manufacturer of that product. Then you might start seeing differences in performance depending on the manufacturer. It could be, right? You can also see differences maybe by doctors and how they're applying the HCTPs, but it would be publicly available so that everyone can see. And if there are any safety issues, those are alerted in the system as well. But technology could come in handy right now to do that. Yeah.
It's an exciting time to be in the space.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
And we're more concerned than ever about our healthcare. And we're very, I think the general population is very much involved in wanting to know what's going in their bodies and what they're putting in, and they are keenly aware that they should know the efficacy, they should know the safety, right? Especially after the COVID era, everyone wants to understand what safety is, and they appreciate clinical trials and want to go through the data. So it's an exciting time. Yeah,
it is.
All right. Well, next episode, we'll get on to the next subject. The next one is actually very, it's self-explanatory. Combination of products. Thou shalt not combine products together. But is it clear?
We'll find out.
Lots
more to come.
Until next time.
Thanks, Donna.
Bye.